Today's episode of the Ramp It Up podcast contains explicit language and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener's discretion is advised. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Ramp It Up podcast with your host, Ronell Sinuis.
Are you ready to ramp it up?
Ramp it up, ew!
Hey, yo, ramp it up, B.
Girl, ramp it up! Ramp it up!
The Ramp It Up podcast.
Hey, you need to ramp it up.
Ramp it up.
And we are back with another episode of the Ramp It Up podcast. I am your host and your favorite on wheels, Ronell. February the 14th has come and gone. Valentine's Day, the day of love, amore, l'amour. I don't know too many other languages to say love. But anyway, love. It's Valentine's Day, guys, and we are no different here on the podcast. We're celebrating the day for relationships and love set aside by Hallmark to make a whole lot of money off of us. But just because we have spinal cord injuries or disabilities doesn't mean we are not trying to get back out there and find that special one for us. And today on the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Ryan DeRoche. Ryan DeRoche is a fellow quad. He is also a United Spinal member. He's a member of the Greater Boston chapter. He's a peer mentor, and he hosts After Dark SCI for Men, which is a Zoom group and support group that talks about relationships, love, sex, and intimacy post-spinal cord injury. This particular group is for men, as the title suggests. So today we're talking about dating from the male perspective post-spinal cord injury. It was a great conversation with him. We share some advice and some of our personal experiences. Now, Ryan is not a counselor. He is not a physician, but he is a man with lived experiences, and, you know, who better to get advice from than someone who has lived and had shared experiences as you. So make sure to tune in. It's a great conversation. Like I said, we cover online dating, in person, a few other things, but consider this part one because there was so much we didn't get a chance to cover. But I'm going to make sure to join his support group because there's a lot of questions that I have personally as well. Now that also leads us to our question of the day. Since we're talking about dating post SCI, the question of the day is, what is your best or worst dating experience post SCI? Again, what has been your best or worst dating experience post spinal cord injury? And I'm asking not only those with the injury, if you are the loved one of someone or you've dated someone with a spinal cord injury, please feel free to share. You'll find the question on our Instagram page as well, so you can answer there. It is ramp.it.up.podcast. That's ramp.it.up.podcast on our Instagram, Facebook as well. Just search for. If you prefer to answer in our email, you can email us at rampituppodcast@gmail.com. I will make sure to either answer you directly or share on the next time the podcast comes up. Now, I know by now everyone is subscribed to the podcast on whatever is your preferred podcast platform. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio. But if you have not rated and reviewed the podcast, it is about time to do so. We want to know what you guys think about the podcast. I'm sure we deserve a 5-star rating, but we want to know your feedback, your input, and of course, ideas on any other guests or topics you want us to cover here on the podcast. Before we jump into the interview with Ryan, I just want to give you guys a bit of a warning. I was having some technical difficulties during our recording, so there is some feedback, but it is still very audible, and I promise it will be taken care of for the very next episode. But for now, happy Valentine's Day to everyone, and enjoy the conversation. And on this episode of the Ramp It Up podcast, joining me, I have Ryan DeRoche from the United Spinal. Ryan, say hi to the people.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Ronell. Excited to talk about this subject today.
Cool. Thank you very much. As you guys know, Valentine's Day was this week, and the ladies get all the flowers and the chocolates and all the accolades while the guys do all the work. So I wanted us to talk about relationships from the male perspective post spinal cord injury. And Ryan, he actually hosts a spinal cord injury conversation on Zoom about relationships and love and stuff post spinal cord injury. So I figured he'd be the best person to give us some advice this year. So thanks for joining me, Ryan.
Thanks, Ronald.
Just to give the folks a little bit of background about you, in 2011, Ryan had a mountain bike accident in, I'm probably going to say the name wrong, Girona, Spain. He injured his C3, 4, and 5 vertebrae with incomplete damage to his spinal cord at C4. When he was stable enough to fly home, he spent 6 months at Spaulding Rehab in Boston. Since his injury, he has been a peer mentor and advocate for other individuals with SCI through the Greater Boston chapter of United Spinal Association and Empower SCI. He also works as the digital media coordinator, is a board member of and leads a support group for GBC. The long-running support group he leads is called After Dark for Men with SCI, which is a safe and a supportive space to discuss intimacy, sex, and relationships after a spinal cord injury. Very self-explanatory. I don't think anyone need any help after that one. But again, thanks for taking time off to join us here, especially to talk about this topic.
Very important topic.
I would say also as a quad myself, I think my occupational therapist touched very little on getting back into the dating game and love, and so did the psychologist that was working with us on staff. But they don't really walk you through it afterwards. Once you're sent home, it's like, go figure out life on your own. And that's a big area of conversation, especially for some of us who've been injured a little younger. I know folks who've been injured since they were like teenagers. I was 30 when I was injured. So life is, we're trying to get back out there on the horse, so to speak, but no one really walks us through. So first and foremost, thanks for hosting such an important group to give guys a safe space to have the conversation. But before we get into it, I want to know who's Ryan. Who's Ryan DeRoche?
So before my injury, I worked for a big company, bicycle company that did luxury tours all over the globe. So I was their logistics manager and bicycle mechanic. And that's why I was in Spain at the time. And I was really super into bikes before that. I was a mechanic, career mechanic. And so when I got injured on the mountain bike, it was kind of a surreal experience. But also, when you're a mountain biker or really any extreme sports, you kind of know that there is a potential risk there. So it definitely kind of hit home pretty quick because I wasn't able to get back to riding. And but I have, and I can go into that later on in the discussion, but been able to get back to it in some way, shape, or form. When I did get injured, I went through the whole rehab experience. I was in acute care in Spain for about a month, and then got med flighted back to Boston, where I did my inpatient rehab at Spaulding Rehab. It was in Charlestown at the time. From there on out, while I was at Spaulding, I had a couple of mentors that really helped me kind of see that there was something on the other side of the injury, and that life was not over. I had a similar experience to you as far as getting the quote unquote sex talk, the birds and the bees from my OT. I actually had a female OT, and she felt more comfortable. Yeah, she felt more comfortable with me speaking with a male. And it really didn't matter to me, honestly, but the male OT gave me, the very basics, There's going to be issues with getting an erection. There's going to be issues with orgasm, spasticity, and getting autonomic dysreflexia. And that was basically it. Just be careful. You might need to use meds, that sort of thing. But I never really got the firsthand experience. And at the time of my injury, I was also single. So, I didn't have anyone to have experiences with while I was either in the hospital or just out of the hospital. So I kind of had to learn things on my own. And, but I did, like I said, I did have a couple of mentors that gave me a little bit while I was in the hospital. They kind of gave me a little bit of a, firsthand experience, but we didn't have what we have now at the Greater Boston chapter, for support groups. We have 11 or so support groups, and 3 of them are about talking about sex after spinal cord injury. One for men, which is what I run, and then we also have a female only, and we also have one for significant others. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but often I mention on the podcast, I think support groups have like a bad connotation. People think it's like everyone hold hands and a kumbaya and cry.
Yeah.
Feelings. I'm like, I think it's a very important part after something traumatic, or just having a group of people who've gone through similar experiences as you, and just to share. Sometimes it's the best place to find out information. So I always encourage the listeners, find a support group. If it's not an official support group, just a like-minded group of people to kind of share experiences.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm glad that you brought that up, because when we first, especially when the pandemic hit, and when we first really started talking about having groups virtually, and having as many groups as we do, we've actually kind of gone back and forth about what to call them. At first we were calling them discussion groups, because there is a stigma with the term support group. And we didn't want them to really feel like support groups. And we do call them support groups now, but I think it's because that's what they are. They're support groups. They do support each other. They support our peers. And it's not, it can be the like touchy-feely and, the big time typical support group. But it's not just that. It's a small community. We do have good discussions. We don't just do the, hey, my name is this person, and I'm here to talk about this. It's really good discussions that we have. Yeah.
You mentioned a pandemic. I think that's around when I got involved with United Spinal, and it was important because we all went from living life and being out in the world to being sequestered to our homes, literally quarantined at home. And I think that was the only way, if it wasn't for these Zoom meetings, to really socialize. And I've spoken to a few of my other friends who have spinal cord injuries. I was like, look, sometimes it's a little corny or it might be a little boring, but it's fun interacting with people. We play games online, or have our home lunches. But the information and just the camaraderie I think I've made over the last few years, not just here in South Florida, but with people literally all the way through Puerto Rico, it's been amazing. So again, quick note: support groups, don't turn your nose up to them, or not give them a try. If it's not for you, we get it, but I think you should give it a try.
Yeah, and one of the things that we put on, I'm pretty sure we have it on our website still, and we also say at the beginning of the groups, is that you don't need to participate necessarily, especially if it's your first time. There's no pressure to do that. It's more about coming in and listening, and maybe picking up especially with our the After Dark for Men's group, you might pick up a tip that might help with, especially if you're like trying to have a kid, or you're trying to get out and get back to dating, or just questions about whether or not something will work for you. Chances are we have one or more people that have gone through what you're going through. So, it definitely is helpful, and it's even helpful to me. I've been injured for 12 years, and I still learn stuff from my peers. So, it's definitely just pop in, say hello, and you can, be on there with your screen off if you want to. It's, we're not going to judge. That's for sure.
Now, just out of curiosity, I'm gonna rewind just a little bit. You talked about your injury being in Spain and spending some time in the hospital there. How would you compare the healthcare system there in your short experience to over here back in the States?
Well, the actual insurance, fortunately, I guess I don't know much about. Thankfully, I didn't really live there. I wasn't a resident there. And the insurance that I got, I was very fortunate because I was technically working when I did have the accident. So workers' comp pretty much picked up the bill when I was there. But in terms of like the actual nursing and doctors, they were amazing. They didn't speak much English, and unfortunately, I didn't speak much Spanish. So, there were some communication issues, but I had some really good friends that I worked with that came in to help with translation and stuff. So, getting past that, the surgeons were amazing. The nurses were just so helpful and attentive. But the biggest difference was the technology. Man, it was such a world of difference between the two. Their like PT room was, unfortunately, it was pretty like kind of old school. There wasn't all the technology that you see at the United States hospitals, the American hospitals. I don't know if it was the particular hospital that I was in, but it was definitely a world of difference when I came back over to the States. And Spaulding is, one of the better places to be with the spinal cord injury, including like Craig and Shepherd and all those places. Those hospitals really try to be at the top of technology and top of their fields for making sure that people with spinal cord injury come out okay, come out as independent as possible, and as strong as possible. So it was definitely a world of difference between the two.
Similar experience. I was in Haiti when I was injured.
Okay.
Yeah. And I literally had to go to two different hospitals because the first one didn't even have like an MRI or X-ray machines.
Same here.
Else, and we contacted the doctor here, and he was like, "Whatever you do not let them do the surgery over there. Make sure here will take care of it." And so I guess I can say the same. Very fortunate that there was some form of healthcare to stabilize, but they were, as far technologically and the resources they had at hand, I was very fortunate to be able to come back here for my healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. I was in the same position. Because I was in Girona, they brought me to a Girona hospital, and the doctor there, I remember him clear as day, even though I was out of it, telling me that they got to send me to Barcelona, which was about an hour or so away. And man, that ambulance ride was a trip. It was pretty crazy, but it was good that where I landed in Barcelona, the surgeon was really good. I guess he was like one of the top in spinal cord field of surgery. So thankfully I was lucky there. I didn't need to be med flighted right away. But yeah, I'm glad that I did end up in Spaulding in Boston. It was probably the best place I could have gone, for me at least. And my family was, we're all local, so I think that was the biggest part of it. I was able to have my support system here, and that was really good.
All right. So speaking of your support system, can you tell me a bit about the experience now? You're out of outpatient. You're probably aging. You're out of inpatient. You've probably done outpatient for about a year or so. What was it like transitioning back to everyday life?
Certainly having a good support system was really important. Whether it be family or friends or peers, having peer mentors or just other people in chairs with spinal cord injury really, really helps big time. So after my discharge, thankfully I was able to find an accessible apartment, a couple of blocks away from where my parents live. So having something like that was great. And being close to them was really good. And then doing the outpatient for, like you said, a year or so. And then I also did a few years of Journey Forward, which is it's like basically a gym for people with, it's kind of like Project Walk. I know more people know what Project Walk is than Journey Forward. But very similar. Yep.
Right. And now just kind of, how was it like getting back into social situations? Because I think a lot of people either assume through, unfortunately being ableist, that people with disabilities just stay home. We're not trying to go out and have fun or party, How was it, transitioning back to wanting to go out and hang out with friends and such? Yeah. It was really important to me to get out and get out of my comfort zone. Because pre-injury, I was very outgoing, and even though I was kind of an introvert, and still am, it was really important for me to get out and kind of be myself again. So going to concerts and everything, concerts and restaurants, bars, really anything that I did before my injury, I tried to do. And it brought me back to just kind of a sense of being, I guess. I know my first year or two, I had a real issue with like my body image. I looked very different. I didn't have the body that I had pre-injury, and that was a hard time for me, especially getting back to like dating and stuff. So I had to kind of get over that, and I really think that getting out and doing more helped me get over that, because people just kind of act like you're the same person, especially friends and stuff. They really treated me the same way. They still gave me crap all the time, and they didn't let up. Still the same sense of humor and stuff. So that really helped quite a bit. And then getting back to like dating was tough, because doing it, organically in the old-fashioned way, again, kind of the body image thing got a little bit in the way, and kind of figuring out how to communicate with the people that I was, looking to date. So getting into online dating was a little bit helpful, because I could write in my profile, I could get right into what was going on with me. I am disabled. I do use a wheelchair. I am a quadriplegic. There are some things that are going on with me that you can't see in my images that I'm sharing. So ask me questions. Any question is, okay. I'd rather you learn about me now versus down the line, and make it more difficult down the line. I don't want surprises. And I know that some people feel differently about that, so we can go into that more if you want. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you just gave me a lot, because I'm thinking about my experience.
Right.
Similar. I mean, at the time I was dating someone, we were rather serious, got into the accent, didn't work out. So now I think in the forefront of my mind was, okay, let's get as healthy as I can to see if I'm gonna get back on my feet. And when you kind of realize getting back on your feet might be a long-term project, like you said, the body image issues start to kind of come in. You go from working out every day, every other day. I'm not going to say I had a six-pack, but there was one somewhere underneath. There's something there. But you know what you look like. Dress like. Those are certain level of confidence that you had in yourself physically, and coming out of that injury, coming out of therapy, it's not necessarily there. And then something I know I've talked to a few guys about, the way you dress. All of us kind of go through the sweatpants and big shirt and the hoodies, because one, it's easy when you're being tossed around in therapy, and then it's just easier for your aid to put on. So it's like, well, now not only does my body not the same, as fresh as I used to look, as clean as I used to look, it's not the same thing. So what would you say was the first thing you had to kind of address for yourself to kind of get your confidence back into those social situations?
I would definitely, I mean, you kind of touched upon it there. Like, I'm not as fresh as I used to look. I know, I don't dress the same way. I think getting back to that was important. Thankfully, I have an aunt that's a seamstress, so making some clothes that were more adapted to me. So like adapting my jeans. I used to love wearing jeans, and um, so the texture of jeans for me is really painful. The seams that they use, the buttons that they use, all of that's really difficult. And getting into them to do catheters. I do intermittent catheters. So I worked with her quite a bit on not only modifying clothes that are pre-made, but she made some jeans for me that are like form fit. They have a pocket on it that I can get into. They have magnets on the fly so I can get into to do catheters, and they look decent. They look like what I would normally wear. So kind of getting yourself back to that. And it's not that you have to wear that all the time. Certainly I still wear, the jogging pants and t-shirts and all that stuff all the time. But when you want to go out and look good, you can still do that. You just got to kind of find what clothes work for you, what shoes work for you. Kind of, it can be an expensive endeavor to try different things on, but go to different stores and try things on. And if it's not accessible for you, then they'll figure it out. I think there was one point where I actually had I had a caregiver and myself inside of a dressing room, and I was like sticking halfway out of the dressing room. The only thing that was covering us was the curtain, and even the curtain was like halfway open. And I don't really care myself. I know some people are a little bit more careful about that stuff, but I didn't care. I was like, I got to try stuff on. You got to make do with what you got. Another thing, just a tip on trying clothes on. Amazon has a really cool thing called, I think it's called Try Before You Buy.
Try before you buy. Yep.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. You can get a bunch of different sizes, you can get a bunch of different clothes and try things on. And I forget, it's like 7 or 10 days or something like that. You can return it, and they don't charge you. So you can try it on in your own home and try it on for a day or whatever, and see what works for you.
And you know what? This is great advice because, you have to have that like coming into yourself moment. Because for me, I was going to church. I was finally like able to, start going back to church. I felt socially able. And growing up, always going to church. I was always in a suit or, dressed up. And here I am in sweatpants and a polo. Mm-hmm. And I just felt, I just didn't feel sexy. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like myself. Right. And one day I asked my, of course, you get the quad belly and your arms aren't, I lose some mobility. So I'm like, can I get my dress shirt on? And my aide was like, I'll come extra early. We'll see if we can get you in your dress clothes.
Right.
And he did. And I felt like more like myself.
For
and
sure.
at that moment, I was just like, all right, even if I have to buy the shirt a little bit bigger, if I have to buy the a little bit bigger just to make sure everything's cool, I'm going to make sure I did that. And I did my beard, I got my hair cut at the time. And, you start to feel a little bit about yourself. And, many people have said, what is it? The dress maketh the man, but the reality is you have to present yourself because as, we're talking about dating, you can't expect someone to find you attractive if you're not finding yourself attractive. You're not making that effort.
Yes.
You're not cleaning up and showing your confidence in what you're wearing.
Yep. And it's definitely, after the injury, it's definitely, as I said before, it's body image is definitely a problem. It's very difficult to get over that change. And you do, and I'm not going to say everybody does, but a lot of people do kind of get over that hump and realize that, this is my body now. I need to love it. And you can change some things. And the easiest thing to change is, your hair, like you said, getting your hair cut and getting your beard trimmed. Go to a barber and have them do it, and a lot of that can really boost your confidence, like really fast. It can boost your confidence. If you feel like you look good, and presentable, then you definitely get to the point where it's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Let's do this. Let's get out there.
All right, so I guess we could use that as our first bit of advice for the guys listening. Work on your image, clean up as best as you can, check your style, whatever works for you, of course, comfortable and safe for you, but, kind of get back to that point. Now let's talk a bit about online dating. I know a lot of folks tend to look towards online dating as their solution to meet people. And of course, you can meet people a little further than just your area. What would be, you kind of gave one a little bit before, but what would be your advice for setting up your online profile?
Yeah, as I said before, I put as not a ton of information, but I make sure to tell the people that I'm, the women that I'm looking for, that I am disabled, and pictures, I put pictures of myself in a chair. I make sure that they know that that's what's going on, because I don't want to catfish them. I feel as though starting off a relationship is, you need to be as honest as possible. And I mean, I will be honest, it's possible that it turns women away, but those are the women that I don't want. If they can't deal with me being a wheelchair user and being a quad, then that I don't want them. I want someone that's going to love me for me and my personality and the things that I do for myself and them and the world. I don't want to be just just rated on my looks, and what's going on with me physically. I do actually mention in most of my profiles that the plumbing does work, but it's not perfect, just again, kind of just getting past that awkward question mark that I'm sure a lot of women do have. So yeah, that's one of the things. And as another trick, if you have a pet, like a dog or a cat or some other pet, put that in there too, because that's usually a good icebreaker. Yeah.
That's smooth. I like the plumbing works kind of, that's a
Yeah.
great fix to again, joke around, but address it. And I've looked online, for different suggestions, and catfishing, I agree 100%. Don't do it. I think in the beginning, I just was kind of doing the chest pictures and just like my headrest in the back. And we're talking like, hey, what's that thing behind you? And, you kind of explain, and then that's the end of the conversation. And I think I again had another, coming to myself moment where I was like, you know what? If you can't deal with me being in my chair, then I don't want to have these conversations. So I would put me with my friends, or, me doing an activity, or, completely nicely dressed up, but all in my chair. So we get it out up front, like you said, do some sort of icebreaker or something that makes you look more fun or approachable with a pet or something.
Yeah.
And understand that just like them swiping left just because they're not interested with you, there'll be many people who are going to swipe left because, they don't know anything about someone in a chair, or they're just not interested. Yeah. And you don't want those people. I don't want anyone that I have to trick into loving me or being interested in me. You don't want anyone to, feel bad for me. And I know we're going to get into, I forgot what the term is when people are, for a fetish reasons, are more interested in you being in a chair.
Devotees.
Yeah, devotees. One of the guys setting up on our profile, he was like, hey, look out for devotees. I was like, well, that's such a nice word. They're devoted to me. He was like, no, do a little Google research. Can you tell what devotees are?
So devotees are typically, not all, but typically they are people that are, it's like a fetish that they have for people with disabilities. And there's a little bit broader of a term too, but that's typically what we talk about when we're talking about devos or devotees. They usually kind of have a kind of a sixth sense of their love for people with disabilities. And I know some people that are okay with it and that can get over the fact that it can be um, kind of a problem. It could be bad for a relationship, but I personally do not go after those people. I do not accept inquiries from those people just because I don't want my relationship being about my disability. I want it to be as excuse me, as normal as possible, which can be hard to find in relationships in general. But I want to start off on a good foot, and I don't want to have that be a part of things myself. And hey, to each his own. There are some people that there's some weird fetishes out there. I don't like the whole foot fetish, but some people really like it and get into it, and that's okay, as long as it's not hurting anybody. But some of them can be pretty hurtful. Devos can be pretty hurtful. It can be pretty bad. So,
And I'll say this as well. Like you said, I don't want someone who wants me because of my disability. Like it's kind of weird. Like, oh, the way your hands curl, I just love it. Like, oh, that's a little weird. And
yeah,
I don't want someone who's like, I love you despite. No, it's just part of who I am. And if we could live with it daily, and I'm not saying ignoring it, and I'm not saying fetishize it. It's just part of who I am. And like you said, the feet thing doesn't work for me either. I don't get it. I've had the conversation with my friends, but whatever. That's you. If it works for Billy, Billy, have fun. If it works for you, I love it for you. But it's not for me. I'm looking for a real connection.
Right. And there's a lot of them out there, unfortunately. And you look at like Facebook groups or forums on like Reddit, and you just got to be careful because some of them can be malicious. So you just gotta be kind of careful with that stuff.
Have you been approached by anyone with those interests?
Oh yeah, far too many than I'd care to admit. And sometimes I honestly kind of roll with it and see where the conversation goes, but it's usually pretty obvious that what they want is a devotee relationship. They kind of get into like really quick, super quick. They kind of get into I want to care for you. I want to clean you up. I want to watch you transfer. I want to do all these like weird things that would not come from a well-adjusted person.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think it went that far. That would be a little.
Oh yeah. What's that?
Yeah, I said that would be a little weird for me. No, that's definitely,
it gets strange.
No. So second advice: set up your profile, be open, look out for devotees, whether you want it or not. Be aware that they're had a little technical difficulty there, Ryan, but thank you for being so flexible. I appreciate it.
No problem at all.
All right, so we're finishing up about online dating and just letting the people know about devotees and just others who may not be out to be in a relationship for you, taking advantage, or just those who can't necessarily deal with that. That's okay. Everyone has their thing, but now we're moving on to guys. We have our online profile. We've spiffied up ourselves, cleaned up our beards, got a nice outfit. Give us advice on preparing for going on an actual first date. You met someone, they know about your chair. Now what do I do?
So I would say kind of depends on your level of disability. If especially with spinal cord injury, if you're para versus a quad. So from my perspective as a quad, I have caregivers and I don't drive, so I typically need to have caregivers drive me to the date. And sometimes they'll even need to come in if it's like cold out or whatever, come in and take off my jacket or whatever. So if I've been talking with this person that I'm going on a date with for any amount of time, I usually let them know that I will have a caregiver with me, and that they are not part of the date. They are there to basically just help me get set up and then they will be out of sight, out of mind for the date. Now this is certainly a personalized situation, so you need to describe what's going on with you before the date, and what might be needed or not needed during the date. I can usually handle like dealing with food and stuff on my own as long as it's placed, in a good spot in front of me. But if it's like meat or something like that, I can't cut the meat up. So, again, I kind of try and go into the date making sure that the person that I'm seeing knows as much about me beforehand, for a couple of reasons. One reason, so that we're not wasting each other's time. If this is too much for that person, I want to know before I even get to the date, because it's going to take me 1 to 2 hours to get ready for the date, between showering, shaving, getting dressed, getting out the door and all that. It takes a while. So, you want to save yourself some time, and you want to save the other person some time. So if you feel comfortable enough to do that for the date, then that's good. That's a good sign. If the person is still willing to meet you, and they're okay with cutting food up, and dealing with the caregiver and all that stuff, then that's a really good sign that they're willing to meet with you still. Again, that's personally, I know that some people do it differently. Paras don't necessarily need to do that stuff. They, typically a para can drive themselves, and, can dealing with, taking off jackets and all that stuff. So it's usually not too much of a problem for paras. But you should always feel comfortable with the person that you're going to date, that you can give them the information that you need to give them, so that the date goes smoothly. You want the date to go nice. You don't want it to be awkward and all that stuff. The date will be awkward on its own. You know what I mean? You don't want to make it worse by being dishonest and surprising the other person. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me. Other than that, personally, like getting ready and all that stuff, I make sure that I'm showered. I make sure that I get clean clothes on, just like you want to do for any date. Any person would hopefully go out on a date when they're clean and suited up, ready to go. I also, not that I expect sex after a date, but I also make sure that my apartment's clean. Not everyone's dating women, but if you're dating a woman, or anyone, you should make sure that your bathroom's clean. You should make sure that you get clean sheets. You should make sure all that stuff is done before a date, because you don't know where it's going to go. Again, don't expect it, but it's good to be prepared.
Now, one thing I always, especially if we're talking about being prepared, and this works out for us going anywhere, do your research, do some homework about the place you're going to.
Yes.
And you want to get set up, like you said, take an hour or two to get ready, get transported. However, sometimes you have to take STS to get to where you're going, and you can't get in the door. Or places you're trying to set up, it's a balcony and you can't get out to the balcony. So, of course, find out what kind of activities your date wants to do or be a part of, and find somewhere that's accessible to you as best as you can. Yeah. Last thing you want is to ruin the date by just not being able to do stuff. I think, for me at least, like you said, in my experience, I want to make it as accessible as possible, so it's not drawing attention to me being like an inconvenience or something of that. Yes, I'm similar. I'm a quad, so I have to have my aide there with me, and I made assistance eating and drinking. So I'm gonna make everything else as simple as possible. If it's seats were somewhere, I made sure I know our seats are together. I know we're in a good, comfortable spot. If it's a movie or something like that, so you want to make sure even the tables, if you're going out to dinner, if you've been there before, make sure it's somewhere you can sit up underneath and, you're not bumping into everyone. Do your research on where you're going.
Yeah, exactly. And I would even, I usually go to a place especially for the first date, just so that it takes a lot of pressure off of me. I try to go to some place that I already have been, that I know well, so that, everything that I'm worried about, I know is going to be okay. And if you're going to a place that you don't know about, I would even suggest like the day before, if you're able to, go to the place and talk to the hostess or to the owner or, someone there, and just be like, hey, I plan on having, you don't have to say date, but I plan on being here tomorrow with someone. And I just want to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. And honestly, the person that you're going on a date with, if they ever found out that you did that, you got brownie points like forever that you've done something like that to make sure that things go smoothly. It's like you said, preparation, just making sure that you're prepared, is really good. It's really good.
It's funny. I was trying to go to like an outdoor festival, and I had a date, and I was calling around trying to figure out all the accessibility options, and if are we gonna be in grass, and I ended up getting a manager on the phone, and the guy, and I told him, look, it's a date. I'm quad, and like he went out of his way to make sure the date was great. He was like, oh, here's my personal number if you run into anything that's inaccessible. And, not to say I'm always looking for someone to, go above and beyond, but like you said, preparation. You never know what can go wrong. That's just anything can happen. But if you do everything in your power to make sure that you've covered all your bases, when something does happen, the person is cool enough to laugh it off with you and move on. But if you didn't show that you made any effort in preparation, like and said, you're gonna lose out on a lot of brownie points.
Yeah. It is a little bit more work, but you know what? After our injury, you definitely learn that putting a little bit of work into preparation can make the actual event, no matter what event it is, whether it's a date or going on a trip or whatever, it's going to make your life so much easier. And also calling on the phone, if it's if it's a place that's really far away and you're not able to get there, calling on the phone is the best thing that you can do. And certainly talk to a manager, not, just a waiter or waitress or hostess or whatever, because they don't always know the situation. Usually the managers will be willing to work with you a little bit more, maybe send you pictures. You want to make sure that the bathrooms are good to go, all that stuff. And this is even just for restaurants. This is for, if you're going to, a movie theater or, just really anything like that. You just want to be prepared. It definitely makes your life a lot easier, makes your caregiver's life a lot easier. And it definitely shows the person that you're going to see that you're ready, that you're ready to get out there and you're serious about what's going on.
I'll even say this, I had an opportunity where, like you said beforehand, I was honest and we talked about the needs and stuff of the date, and it was more specific. She wanted to go, and she did some of the research and let me know, look, into the accessibility of this place, here's a number you can speak to, but I think you'll be fine. And you're surprised when the person gets to know you and they like you. Nothing's a real obstacle in the way of you guys spending time together, whether it becomes romantic or just friendship or not. Like, the reality is they will do that extra for you.
That's so right. It's and it's a good, and man, a boost of confidence is when you get that, when you have that partner that is willing to do that for you, especially if it's a first date and they're willing to research like what's going on. That's, man, that is a huge confidence boost when you learn that happens. So I hope everyone that's listening gets that at some point.
Have you seen the movie The Upside with Kevin Hart and I can't remember the other actor's name?
Oh man, I haven't, but it's on my list, which is really crazy because it's been on my list for a long time, and you just reminded me about it. I heard it's really good.
Yeah, it is good, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's
definitely
a date scene, and the character was he had been back and forth writing letters with someone, and they finally decided to go on a date, and he had his caregiver with him, and the lady was like, no, don't worry about it, I'll take care of him. But I guess during the date realized it was too much, having to help eat and things like that. And what would you say when faced with that kind of an obstacle, when, whether you're actually dating the person or just going out a few times, when they realize and let you know, hey, this is a bit too much for me.
Yeah. Yep. And that can happen. I mean, especially if it's a new injury and the the person can certainly get overwhelmed. And that's okay. Like, don't be hard on yourself if that's happening. And vice versa, if it's the person that you're going on a date with that's overwhelmed, again, that's you've learned a lesson. And don't take it personally, because that person, even though they're overwhelmed, you've learned that, okay, this is something that I need to address in the future. I need to kind of be okay with that. And that can happen to any date for any person. Does not matter if you're disabled or not. You're gonna have bad dates. There's a very lucky few that go on one date and end up with that same person for the rest of their lives. And it's okay if you end up seeing multiple people. You learn a lot about yourself and about what you're looking for by going on multiple dates. And don't settle.
Yep.
And don't settle. Just because you're disabled does not mean that you have to settle for someone. Yeah, that's huge.
So
love yourself.
I want to kind of get to, now you're in a relationship. We've talked about getting ready for dates, not settling. Now you found someone, you guys are doing great.
Yeah.
This is where I know I personally have a line, and I'm sure some of the guys in the group, as we get to that aspect of the conversation, have brought up. Where do you kind of draw the line, if at all, between your partner and your caregiver? I know people have their wives or husbands or boyfriends and girlfriends as their primary caregiver, and others don't. Me personally, I do not like the idea. Of course, help me do something simple, works for me, but I don't want my partner, loved one to be my primary caregiver.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it certainly depends on situations. Everybody's got a different situation, and they get different hours for caregivers, and financially things can be different for everybody. So I don't really want to say one way or another. Personally, I don't like mixing caregiver with relationship, and I'm lucky enough that I don't have to do that. I don't think that there's really necessarily anything bad about it, as long as the partners can separate and have personal time and have caregiver time. For me, with having caregivers, I really want my caregivers to deal with bathing and bowel and bladder and really all the messy stuff. I don't mind if my partner is, helping me get a drink, or helping me cut my food, or helping me with the jacket, or even getting dressed sometimes. But I definitely don't like mixing the nitty gritty stuff. But that said, if I were to go on like a trip or something like that, bringing a caregiver along can be costly.
Yeah.
And that also can be like a third wheel situation, even if they are separated from the couple. But it can be very expensive. You have to pay for their flight. If you're going far away, you're going to pay for their flight. Probably a separate room. If you can't afford that, then having your caregiver be a part-time caregiver and just at least learning the do's and don'ts of bowel program and bathing and all that stuff, I think that is where I would let the line get gray. So far, I have not had to do that, honestly. This is almost a tangent, but I do not want to fly because of all the issues with chairs and how they get wrecked and stuff. I am deathly afraid of having my chair get messed up, and it's my only chair. It's my way to be free. So I don't want to make anyone feel as though that they shouldn't travel, but personally, that's how I feel. So we've done road trips and stuff, and thankfully I've been able to have caregivers with. But yeah, it can be situational. You really kind of have to do with what you're comfortable with. I'm glad that you did say that you don't like mixing it either, because I know quite a few people don't like mixing the caregiver relationship situation.
And I just want to kind of follow what you said. I don't want to be insensitive because, yes, we do understand that
Yeah.
everyone's situation is different financially. Your family. There are many different variables that go into it. So I personally, and I'm not even advising. Don't take this one as advice. Everything else is advice. This one not. What I will say is, do what works for you and your partner. I'll agree with you. I think for emergency's sake, there are certain things that your partner needs to know how to do. People in their wife, their husband, they're the primary caregiver. It works great for them. So yeah, I've had conversations, and I've had a couple here on the podcast, and they shared, just like you said, we take our private time, and we have the caregiver time. Sometimes they need a little bit of time apart, and that's great. I think if that works for you, it is amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Ronell, though, and apparently for Ryan, gray areas, for me, it kind of ruins some of the sexy. You know what I mean? I want.
It does. It can for sure.
Not to say that she'll never see you sick or something. Those things happen. I think that those all fall into the gray areas. But the more I think I can keep from, of course, I'm not hiding it, I'm not keeping it from the person. The person knows about everything, but to be hands-on involved, that's where I kind of draw the line.
Right. Yeah. The people that I do know, the couples that I do know that the significant other is the caregiver, they and the ones that make it work are really good at separating the two and cutting out time in their lives to have their relationship, and cutting out time in their lives to have that caregiver situation. So I think making sure that there are boundaries, even if you have to talk to a professional and, a couples professional, the word's escaping. Thank you. Yeah. And, just working that out, I think is really, really important. Wearing both hats is difficult. So just making sure that you're both in a healthy relationship, and communication. I can't believe I haven't said that at all during this this recording yet. Communication is like super key. And when that breaks down, then a lot of problems can happen. So communicating with your loved one and your caregivers too, if you have caregivers, making sure that everybody's on the same page is super important.
We have so much I want to cover. We're definitely going to have a part 2 at some point.
Sure.
But I did want to kind of get into how you got involved with the group, the After Dark SCI for Men.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of started, way back when I got injured. Going back to what we talked about earlier, and having that bare bones sex talk with my OT. And then the same with the mentors. And I don't know if the mentors were just not as comfortable as I am about talking about sex. But I realized then that there was a need for communicating more about it. So I've always been really, when I started, so a couple of years after I got injured, I started being a peer mentor with the United Spinal, the Boston chapter. And not right away, but when I started seeing patients, that's the first question out of the box is, especially for males. I don't mentor too many females, just because we try to match people up with similar injuries, similar sex, similar background, age, and all that. But every single guy that I talked to, the first questions out of the box were, can I date again? Will I be loved? Can I have a kid? Will it work ever? Will my plumbing work? Will my penis get an erection? And can I orgasm? Those are the questions almost immediately out of the box. If it's not the first question, it's the second. So when we started making more and more of our virtual groups and realizing that we could do this and we had the bandwidth to do that, having a group that talked about sex was a no-brainer. It was one of the first groups that we made other than our general discussion group on Thursdays. So then it raveled into, all right, so if we have a men's only, we really need to have a women's only. And I think the significant other one was right around like almost exactly the same time that we made the men's group. And we just realized that it was a really powerful subject. Everybody wants to know. I mean, as humans, that's what we want to do. We want to procreate. And it's something that is certainly on our minds all the time, whether you admit it or not.
Yeah.
So it's something that's really important to the community. And there's not a whole lot out there that gives information about it, especially detailed firsthand experience. You can talk to your urologist till you're blue in the face, but unless they are injured as well, they don't, they're not sitting in the chair with you, so it's definitely super important to hear it from your peers that this is what's going on. This is what we've tried. And this is what's important to talk to your doctor about. Make sure you talk to your doctor before you do this, that, and the other thing, so that you don't damage yourself, so that you're not taking the wrong meds. Don't buy stuff online without talking to your doctor. I'm glad that we're doing it, really glad that we're doing it. Because even though we don't have a ton of people coming to the group every week, but we've had a steady amount of new people coming in. We have a couple of regulars that come in, and it's just really important for people to hear it from the horse's mouth. Make sure that
you mentioned neurologists. I remember I brought up the conversation with them, and right before we close out, but it was just like, well, you got to go home and practice first. I'm like, I don't think that's how it works. Find someone that, excuse me, that might this or ask your caregiver to flick stuff. No, there has to be more to the conversation. There has to be a better way for them to I guess equip us. It's not like insurance will cover someone to come to your house and check your plumbing. No, it's not how things work. There's a whole lot more that goes in depth. But can you let us know how we can join the conversation, send questions, or just be a part of the Zoom call?
So the men's meeting is every second and fourth Wednesday evening of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs 7 to 8. And we do have a hard stop at 8 typically, and it's more so just so that we can kind of wrap up the conversation and just respect everyone's time. But we're always willing to talk through email as well. So the best place to go to join the meeting is our website. So sciboston.org, and go to the support groups tab, and you'll find the meeting, all of our support groups there. And you can email me at ryan@sciboston.org. And I'm happy to answer questions if you don't want to come to the meeting, or if you do want to come to the meeting and just hang out and listen. It's a pretty relaxed atmosphere, and we try to welcome all people. This particular meeting is for men only. We do sometimes have couples come in. There is a women's one, which you can also find the information there, and for the significant others, which I know is put out to the WAGs groups quite often, but you can also find it on our website in the same place. Significant others, they're going through, as they have almost as many questions, if not more, than we do. So it's good for them to be able to talk to other significant others, make sure that they're educated as well.
You're definitely gonna have to put me on your calendar, because there's so many more questions I want to ask. And I know our listeners want to ask, but before we go, I gotta ask you, what would you say, if you don't mind sharing a story, was your
Mhm.
best or worst date post SCI?
Ooh, wow. Best date would probably be, so it wasn't initially meant to be a date, I guess, but my last uh my last girlfriend, when we actually grew up together, and we kind of lost touch after high school, and we kind of separated, and we kind of reconnected, and she like invited me to go for a walk with, she wanted to walk with my dog Oliver, and which again, kind of icebreaker. He's a great wingman, and it was like we never lost touch. And it was just a really good conversation, and it was really good to see her, and she really kind of understood, without even really talking about it all that much. She really kind of understood what was going on with me, and the injury, and so it was just felt very intuitive and natural. um Worst date, geez. Worst date would probably, um God, I don't really have any horror stories, honestly. um I would say probably not necessarily dates, but probably just communications through uh like internet dating can
Okay.
be some of the worst, because um it's really easy for people to ghost you without saying anything. um so you end up having a really good conversation at first, and then they might learn something about you, whether it's personally or about your injury, and it might scare them. And they kind of just, it's okay for them to just, or they feel okay to just ghost you. And that can be painful, to go through that. Um, but I try not to let it get to me. I try not to take it personally. And again, like I said earlier, it's better off that you learned about that sooner than rather than later.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so I guess I have a horror story, but it didn't start
yeah.
off as a horror story. And I'll do this just so we can close out. Nobody sent me emails laughing at me. Uh, this was our second date. And the first date went real well. So it was like, all right, we can go out. Told my caregiver she can stay home. At the time, I was using condom catheters, especially when I was going out. I didn't want to have any accidents. I was like, yo, I'm cool. We go out, having a good time. We ate, we're watching a show, and we end up going, to the side to kind of chat. And she was like, hey, I'll sit on your lap, give me a little ride. So we're riding around. And the leg bag kind of reached down towards my ankle.
Mm.
I don't know at what point or how her foot hits the little latch to hold the bag,
Oh.
in the bag, and it starts draining. Neither of us notice. We're hanging out, and at some point, she puts her foot down, and she's just like, "Oh wow, the floor is wet. How did it get wet?" And we're still indoors.
Yeah.
And I immediately looked. It was the left leg where my catheter was, and it was kind of dark, thankfully. So I see it like, the cotton of my shoe, the color is changing and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea. I try to play it off. Maybe someone spilled a drink.
Right.
Thankfully, again, she just didn't notice because she knew, I guess, academically that I had one, but, hadn't interacted with it. It's still pretty new.
Right.
So I, not abruptly, but found a way to be like, all right, well, it's getting late. Let's call it a night. I get home, the whole foot pedal was soaked inside my shoe, completely
Yeah.
soaked. So thankfully, I don't think she noticed. And if she did, she was very gracious and it
Yeah.
went out. But I was stupid embarrassed. So that was,
Yeah.
I've heard other urine stories, but that one, especially because it was so early on and us hanging out, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that one got me.
Yeah. Thankfully I haven't had any urine ones. But someone that I was dating, and I wouldn't consider it like a date. But we were in the middle of getting intimate, and I had a little bit of an accident, bowel accident. Um, Yeah, and we laughed about it, thankfully. You know, I have a super dark sense of humor, and I know how to laugh at myself. So, you know, it was more funny at the time. Certainly ruined the mood, but you know, we just thankfully I had my caregiver. You know, she was available. You know, I usually when I have a date at my place, I usually send my caregiver to either next door. I live in like a complex, so I send them next door or like out onto my patio so that we have some privacy. So I was able to get my caregiver back and cleaned up, and you know, we continued the night. But yeah, thankfully I haven't had any like crazy stories during a date, you know, especially first or second date. I've been lucky there for sure.
I think I would have died just a little bit on the inside. Like you said, I think humor is the best way to kind of get over it, especially understanding partner. But I mean, to everyone listening, it's part of the life. It's part of the game. And especially if you're looking to get back into dating or marriage or intimacy, these are things that if you have a good partner, they might do a little research, or you have to do research to kind of warn them. And if they're a cool person, you know, they'll find a way to laugh. Like you said, find the humor and they keep pushing.
And we were able to laugh because I communicated beforehand that this could happen, you know, making sure that you have, when we really didn't, I guess we will have to have a part 2 because we didn't go into like, you know, making sure that bowel program is done properly, and, you know, doing a catheter before sex is really important. You know, those types of things are important. So yeah, maybe we do need to do a part 2, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
A full-on birds and the bees for SCI.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate it again. You know, Valentine's Day was here, and I know a lot of the guys are either trying to get back out there dating or and just need a little bit of advice. So we covered a few things. First and foremost, getting your sexy back in your outfits, and you know how you carry yourself, and you know, cleaning yourself up. Then if you're doing the online thing, just being careful of who you're talking to and how you put yourself out there. You know, get your confidence, be honest. We talked about communicating a lot. And then, of course, doing your research when you're preparing to go out. You know, whatever it is, let them know where you're going and making sure you're comfortable in yourself first. I think I really have to stress that. If you don't think you're ready for it, it's fine. There's no time frame or time limit on getting back out there. As long as you're finding someone that you're comfortable with and not settling, I think is what we can really leave them with on this episode.
Yeah, and love yourself. Like, seriously, don't be too hard on yourself, and make sure you love yourself before you get out there, because that will make it a lot harder if you don't.
I appreciate it, Ryan. This was great. I will definitely be at an upcoming meeting. I'll get the links directly from you so I can put it in our episode notes. I'll be reaching back out to you for a nice birds and the bees talk when we're all straight up adults.
Sounds good. Awesome.
All right, thanks so much, and you have a great one, Ryan.
All right, Ryan, you too.
All right, bye.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to the show. Connect with the podcast on social media. Check out our Instagram page at ramp.it.up.podcast or email us at rampituppodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.